53 days until the U.S. presidential election. I can't believe how quickly that's coming up. There's a phrase, the October surprise, which means something happens in the last few weeks that might jolt the campaign. Well, I already think we've had quite a few surprises in the last month or two. Donald Trump faced an assassination attempt and an inch over, and God forbid the bullet would have killed him. Then, even more crazy, the incumbent president, Joe Biden, was simply removed as the leadership candidate, the presidential candidate, and Kamala Harris was anointed. There was no public process, just absolutely astonishing. Let's check in on the state of that presidential campaign with our best friend down there, Joel Pollak, senior editor-at-large at Breitbart.com. Joel, great to see you again. 53 days, that is so soon, but in another way, that's an eternity. Almost anything could happen. There could be a war. There could be, God forbid, another assassination attempt. What do you think the next 53 days are going to be like?
Well, voting starts already in a few days with some of the ballots already going out. So I don't think 53 days are as dramatic as they once were. We have an election season now, no longer an election day. Election day is really just a deadline and a kind of antiquated ritual, I suppose, for those of us who think that elections involve going somewhere to vote. Now we have this vote by mail system, which is universally associated around the world with fraud or the potential for fraud, but somehow we have allowed it to become part of our system. And we have absentee voting for just about any reason you can think of, or no reason at all, really. So it's not as dramatic as it once was. In fact, I think that this election is basically over, and it's over bar the shouting. We have a lot of shouting to do over 53 days, but I do think most people have made up their minds, and the campaigns will be fighting over whoever's left, which is going to be a small number of people, and it may come down to a few votes. So these fights are important, but basically the election is done.
Well, you know, that's an astonishing way to look at it, but it makes total sense. You wrote a book about the 2020 election. If going from memory, I think you called it Neither Free Nor Fair. Is that right?
It's right, because of all of the various ways in which Democrats tried to rig the election. And I stayed away from the term rigged because I think that the election results could have been legitimate. We don't know that they were necessarily different than they might have been had all other things been equal. And one of the phenomena, for example, that people who believe the election was stolen can't quite explain is that even though Trump lost at the top of the ticket, Republicans won in many congressional races. Democrats had expected to pick up 12 seats, and in fact, the Republicans won many seats. So voters seemed to have split their tickets. You wouldn't expect that it would be very easy to cheat in such a precise way. But I do think that the election was neither free nor fair. There was violence, and there were threats of violence. There were rule changes imposed by the Democrats through the courts against the will of the Republicans. You know, if you're going to change the rules of the election, you have to do that together in a bipartisan way. Everyone's got to agree on the rules for a fair fight. If you're just imposing the rules that benefit your side against the other side, that's not fair. There were also attempts at media censorship. The Hunter Biden laptop was, in fact, censored a month before the election. Many people said they would have changed their vote if they had known that Hunter Biden had confirmed the accusations of his father's corruption and influence peddling. So there were many factors that went into making the last election unfree and unfair. And we're heading in that direction. It's not as bad this time because Elon Musk now owns Twitter, now known as X. And I think the scrutiny has also forced some of the other people who openly participated in the unfairness to stay on the sidelines. Mark Zuckerberg, for example, CEO of Facebook, gave $400 million in 2020 to so-called voter protection projects, or I think it was safe election projects, or whatever it was. But invariably, the money was spent in Democratic districts in swing states on getting out the vote, ostensibly for a public purpose, but really to benefit Democrats. So he's staying on the sidelines now. We have seen some attempts. I mean, the debate that we watched this past week on ABC News was rigged against Trump. There's no other way to put it. When the moderators interjected, by my count, 7 times to fact-check Trump and never once interjected to fact-check Kamala Harris, it's not because Kamala Harris never told lies or misstated the facts. There were many cases in which she referred to hoaxes, completely debunked claims, and the moderator said nothing. So it looks very much like the debate was rigged against Trump, and that's not an overreach to say that. I think that ABC News deliberately made the debate harder for Trump. That's not to say Trump couldn't have done better. I think he could have had a better debate, but he was up against not just his Democratic rival, but the two moderators as well. Having said that, I do think this is a more winnable, fairer, maybe not completely fair, but fairer fight than in 2020.
Well, and that's what I was getting at, because I remember your thesis 4 years ago was unfair, yeah, but they got that unfairness in legally. So it wasn't like they were fraudulently rigging it. They were legally rigging it by changing the rules, by having this mass mailing, vote harvesting voting that's so different than what we're traditionally used to. So I guess my question is, where there is this easy peasy, no voter ID, mail-in vote mush, are those in places like California that really the Republican presidential candidate would have no hope whatsoever? Are the battleground states, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, some of those places, are they as rigged or as tilted as they were last time? Like, really, I think this election is going to probably come down to a half a dozen key states, right? Nevada,
And
maybe,
half a dozen
Colorado.
counties in states that are going to swing the election in their states. In some places, they've managed to tighten things up so that even if they have vote by mail, people trust it more. But Pennsylvania announced several weeks ago that people should not expect a result on election night. Now, Florida has more people than Pennsylvania does, and Florida still turns out a result on election night. Pennsylvania has said it can't. And that's because Pennsylvania is going to be relying once again on vote by mail, and it's going to take them a while to count all the ballots that have been postmarked by election day, but not received by election day, and all kinds of other problems. So yeah, we're living in this weird situation where we're not going to know who has won the election potentially until several days after it. And then there will be challenges in court. Plus there's the weird system that we have, which I actually like, but it's weird and Byzantine, really, the Electoral College. And I think that if Trump wins by a small margin overall, that is to say, if he wins, let's say 280 or 290 Electoral College votes, the minimum for victory is 270. I think that the media and the Kamala Harris campaign and the Democratic Party will try to convince those electors who usually don't have a choice, but who have to cast a ballot. They're going to try to pressure those electors to vote against Trump when the Electoral College meets to vote in mid-December, thereby denying him that majority. It's also possible, by the way, that if Michigan and Pennsylvania go to Donald Trump, but Harris wins all the other states that Biden won in 2020, you could have a 269-269 tie, and then the House of Representatives would decide the winner on January 6th, 2025. So it's going to be a tough fight long after Election Day.